Hello, and welcome back to a mindful moment.
Hi, how are you, Teresa?
I'm doing well. Not thrilled about it being back to 105 degrees, but I'm sure fall will come.
Sometime it will come. I saw a funny like meme the other day where it was like the seasons in California, and it had fool's spring, it had the pollinating, it had fire was a season, it had fall, it had second fall, fool's fall. It's like third summer.
It's crazy.
It
I
is.
mean, to go from, we dropped down, in the 50s at night, and then it got down to like a nice upper 70s, low 80s.
That
I'm
was
like, okay.
perfect. Yeah.
And now it's like 80s at night, and we're back to triple digits during the
It's
day. It's
gross. It's
brutal.
gross.
But again, we're lucky. I know there's lots of people dealing with, still recovering from all the hurricanes and floods, and
Oh
it's
man, I
horrible.
know. I feel for those people. I'm so sorry.
So I'll stop complaining.
Yeah.
Um, what I did want to talk about today, well, let me start with, what the kind of mindfulness that we typically teach and practice is really called secular mindfulness. And it draws very heavily from Buddhism practices, but it's been stripped of all the religious or spiritual elements. And that's really so that it would appeal to a broader audience. And it was done very carefully by very talented and educated people, starting, I think, back in the 70s, where they really set it up as a formal practice. And as a practitioner, as a student of it, you're taught really like the core principles so that everyone's practicing pretty much the same way. So when we say practice mindfulness, it's across the board, right?
Mhm.
But I've heard accusations from some people, not to me, thank goodness, but I have heard this where they make the accusation that it's a cultural misappropriation.
Hmm.
And that struck me as odd because it implies there's only one right way to practice mindfulness, and that
No,
kind
it's
of
not. Yeah, that's
doesn't
not the
align with
case.
mindfulness.
Right.
So anyway, so I personally didn't agree with that, but I thought, well, I should check and just make sure, we're not misappropriating someone else's culture. What I found, this actually ended up being a fascinating little exercise, but the core principles of mindfulness, which are really like awareness, non-judgment, being present, in the present moment, those are consistent across all the diverse ways that mindfulness is practiced across. I couldn't even believe how many cultures. It's basically the whole world. The
Hmm.
whole world. They basically they practice some form of mindfulness. And so even though the core principles are the same, the way they apply it is, vastly different. And so it was a very interesting little, almost like one of those travel guidebooks I was doing. I was looking at all the different ways cultures practice mindfulness. And Buddhism is the oldest known practice, which it's about 2,500 years old. So that would tell me that everyone in the world has looked at the core values of that practice and then adapted it to their own religions or culture. I can completely see why the original developers of this form of mindfulness went like, let's make it secular, and that way anyone can practice it, and that makes
Right.
sense to me.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense too. But how did that even come about that they were thinking whoever was feeling that it was being misappropriated? Like what
Because they
parts
were
of it are they feeling like it's not in line with?
because I think because of the stripping of the religious connotations.
Oh, I see. I
Right.
see. Okay.
So I have much more trouble with the commercialization of mindfulness in the
Hmm.
West, but the religious part, and again, as I went through, not everyone practice mindfulness doesn't mean religious.
No.
Technically, Buddhism was a more of a philosophy than even a religion, but I, of course, have studied Buddhism a little bit, not deeply. I keep reading books and then I forget what I've read. But our practices don't just come out of the Buddhist traditions, I discovered as I was going through this. So, like in the Japanese culture, they practice a form of Buddhism, but it's not the original Buddhism, right? It's Zen Buddhism.
Yeah.
And they have mindfulness meditations, but they call them Zazen, right? So, but
Hmm.
it's still where you're sitting, focusing on the breath, trying to let go of distractions. So it's the same philosophy. But then, and I found this in a lot of the cultures, they also have additional practices that we don't have. So one of them, and I'm sure you've heard of this, is the Japanese tea ceremony.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think it's called chan, chano-yu, something like that.
Hmm.
And it's really where it's a ritual. They do everything slowly and very elegantly, and they um, focus on very deliberate movements and like really simple aesthetics. Like it's
Mhm.
supposed to be this just very simple, regular ritual. But while they're doing it, what they're doing is it's focused on this deep appreciation of impermanence.
Mm.
And that really resonated with me because I have been focusing on that, literally that recently, when as the events in this country and the world keep interfering with my thoughts. I, instead of getting angry or upset, I really have gone to impermanence, which I learned impermanence like a long time ago through something that was spiritual. But I'm like, that is the key, is to get my mind back in that mindset so that it doesn't cause me any upset in my day-to-day living when I can't do anything about it. So I thought that was interesting. Um, but another area that now I want to explore that's also from the Japanese traditions is called wabi-sabi philosophy. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
It sounds familiar actually, but I could not tell you what it is. I can like visualize the words.
Yeah. Well, of course, I thought of wasabi when I first saw it.
Maybe
But
that's where
anyway,
my
it's
brain
wabi,
went. I don't know.
but it's wabi sabi, and it's about valuing imperfection. And then I remembered where I learned about it was in pottery classes because they create pottery that they don't fix the flaws,
Yeah.
right? It's supposed to be imperfect. I'm like, oh, I remember this now. But it also encourages, again, mindful appreciation of life's impermanence and the imperfect nature of things, which is humans. Like we're not perfect, right? So that one I'm going to dive back into, I think, for personal reasons. And then the Chinese, of course, their culture practices Taoism,
Hmm.
and that includes Tai Chi and Qigong. And we just talked about that in our moving
Yeah.
meditation discussion a couple of weeks ago. We practice that. A lot of people practice that as part of their Western mindfulness meditation, right? It's a moving meditation. And then also, mindful eating really comes from Taoism,
Oh.
because what their focus is on is savoring. So, eating a meal is a ritual. You savor every bite. It promotes balance and connection with the environment and the body. And we just call it mindful eating, but it's really savoring is the original practice, which we also use a lot.
It's funny that you even bring that up because I was just thinking as you were talking, I'm like, I don't even really relate mindfulness to religion at all. Like it's just not even, it doesn't even occur to me. And I mean, I'm sure that's probably what is upsetting to some people. It's that no, this came from a deep, path of religion for us, and it's held tightly for them. But as far as in like the Indian culture, yoga obviously is one of the biggest forms of mindfulness meditation, and it's a moving meditation. How we were talking about it, and I know this may not seem like something a lot of people agree with, or I may be saying something that might offend some people, but I do kind of believe that each religion and culture and all these practices, they're really all very similar and the same. It's just a different form of it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like a different word for it, or maybe there's some little tweak to it. But I do think that it all kind of originates in the same space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. You can find certain philosophies that are exactly the same across the three major religions. Even though if you listen to people from those religions, they may say that they have nothing in common. And of course, I think of that a lot lately with everything that's happening in the Middle East, and it's like
Yeah.
we're not that different.
Well, it's
Yeah,
amazing to me that this has been around so long and that so many different cultures practice it, but we're still lacking.
well, we're still a work in progress, I guess. I knew a lot of this came out of the East, but it turns out it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, Indigenous and tribal cultures, they have a form of mindfulness that focuses on connection to nature, which again
Mm.
makes sense, right, when you think about it. And then they practice their storytelling and their oral traditions, being very specific to speak in a mindful way because
Mm.
they're trying, and also active listening, right? So there's a big emphasis on deep listening so that as people are telling stories, people are really also hearing the stories because it's
Yeah.
passed down orally from generation to generation. Um, oh, I will go back to Middle East because I forgot this before I left the East. Middle Eastern and Sufi traditions um, includes Sufi whirling, right? And if you ever watched that, watched people
Mm-mm.
doing like the whirling dervish, I think is what it's called. but it's amazing. Like they wear these white, I don't know what you'd call it. I'm sure there's an actual name of it, but it's like almost like a jacket, a very long jacket that flares at the bottom.
Uh-huh.
And then they just twirl and twirl and twirl as a group. They just keep
Oh,
twirling.
yeah.
And it's a moving meditation. It represents the unity of body, mind, and spirit. I would fall over. I don't know how they do it, but I think they almost get in like a trance from all the
Mhm.
twirling, but they're really disconnecting a little bit from the exterior world and focusing on whatever they're focusing on. I'm sure it's different for different people. But the idea is it fosters mindfulness through repetitive and rhythmic spinning.
Mm.
And then they practice something called, if I say this right, dhikr. That's the repetition of names of God in Islam, right? So
Mm.
it's cultivating mindfulness by focusing the mind on spiritual remembrance. And
Mm.
so already you can see we've talked about a couple that are very based in religion. We've talked about a lot that are based on really not a lot to do with religion. It's got to do with being present, being aware, being open. African cultures practice Ubuntu. We interviewed
Yeah.
somebody for the
Yeah.
podcast.
Dana Sardano
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's an African cultural practice of mindfulness. And then they also practice communal mindfulness. And
Mm.
so both of those are emphasizing the interconnectedness and mutual care of each other, which we need that.
Yes, we do.
So the practices involved in both of those include, like, again, group storytelling, dancing, singing, and again, there's a big focus on listening,
Mhm.
which I think all of us could practice a little more, and then valuing the collective over the individual focus. Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
the West is such an individualist culture. If you look at other cultures that are more of a collective consciousness, collective wisdom, I think it's a lot of why we have so much disagreement and discontent here.
Yeah.
Everybody wants it just their way instead of what's best for the greater good. And in mindfulness, it really does focus more on the greater good. So I found that interesting. That I don't know. I mean, I don't think anyone could tell you where we pulled each piece of mindfulness from.
Right.
Obviously, Buddhism, but I'm hearing a lot of things in this that sound very similar, right?
Well, in a lot of cultures too, when you say the mind, the body, and the spirit, I mean, just about every religion has a different version of that, right? And Buddhism is really rooted in connection to nature. It's the same kind of concept in Hinduism and all of these things. It's like you're really connected to the universe and the earth and everything like that, and then you're pulling your energy from that, and you are that energy. And it's just fascinating to me that I just really have never ever once, even though I used to really be into Buddhism. I mean, I wasn't a practicing Buddhist, but I mean, I studied it relentlessly. I never associated what I see as mindfulness today here in the United States to religion. I just never have. It's
Yeah.
just never even, because to me, mindfulness is more, it's a way of being. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess as a non-religious person, it's easy for me to say that my way of being is mindfulness and it's not my religion. But I think if you take a religious person, their way of being is their religion. So it really kind of all coincides, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
super interesting. That's a whole different topic we could
yeah.
go on and on about.
No, but it's true. And even here, like in the US, I'll have people tell me that they can't meditate because of their religion,
Right.
and it's like, well,
That's what
so they
prayer.
don't see
Yeah.
prayer
Mm-hmm.
as a contemplative practice. I mean, whoever I just mentioned, I already forgot, but whether you're focusing on a deity or you're focusing on your own mind or it's not really about your breath. It's about the fact that it's a stillness. It's where you're calming your mind and you're focusing on being present. And if you're talking to whatever entity you feel is the higher power, whether it's nature, God, whatever it is I don't think that's as much of the point as is the fact that we are chaotic beings who have a hard time staying focused these days, and who as things get more out of control, we tend to contract and become more and more rigid
Mm-hmm.
in, first of all, that our beliefs are the only right beliefs, but secondly, in that it's me against everyone else,
Right.
right? And a lot of the practice of mindfulness from any of these cultures we've talked about is exactly the opposite. It's where when we're concerned for others, when we're connecting with others, that's where the real power comes from, whether it's to focus on breath or whether it's to make changes in the world, I think. But um, it's very interesting to me. I do have three more I want to tell you about. One is Latin American traditions. We
Uh-huh.
just keep expanding our globe here. And their mindfulness practices, including it's music and movement. Okay, so it's dancing, drumming, and singing with
Mm-hmm.
the specific intent to foster emotional expression, presence, and a deep sense of connection. So again, you've got like the same theme from opposite sides of the world. Korean Buddhism really focuses on the monastic traditions,
Yeah.
right? Which sometimes I so want to, I don't know, become a monk. It just sounds so appealing when things are so crazy. I'm like, gosh, just to have that ritual
Everything
every
quiet.
day.
Yeah.
It includes, mindful food preparation, not just food eating, but it's of course they're living it all day long, every day, as well as walking meditation and gardening. And once again, like, when we're teaching classes all the time, we're saying it doesn't matter what it is. It could be gardening, it could be cleaning. You can do anything mindfully. But I just kind of started to see this pattern of we took a lot from Buddhism. I mean, to establish this practice, of course, but you can see we've pulled it from other mindful traditions from around the world. And then finally, Thailand, and I have to look this up now. I just didn't have time before we got together, but much of the focus of their mindfulness is on the loving kindness meditation.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah, so I want to see, like, did we get it from them or did we get it from the Buddhist traditions? I don't know. I'm going to have to look that up.
interesting, huh?
And then the other thing that the other main tradition is called metta meditation. And it involves on cultivating goodwill, compassion, and empathy toward others. What they promote is a form of open-hearted mindfulness. So, which
Mhm.
makes sense if they're doing loving kindness meditation as their main meditation. So,
Where do you think we go from there? Because if I don't want to upset people that feel like we're, not being true to the origins of mindfulness, but at the same time, you want to open it up to cultures and religions that are scared to try it because they think it's going to interfere with their own religion. And I mean, it makes sense that people would automatically, relate it to Buddhism, as, that's people actually relate yoga to Buddhism a lot, which is not really
yeah,
where it came from, but it's like this, just association that is made automatically. And I think that because it kind of came from that and meditation and everything, I think that it's just automatically assumed that it is a religious practice and I can't do it because that's
yeah,
not my religion. But I would love for it to not have that stigma. If more people
yeah.
were able to practice it, and I think a lot of people probably practice mindfulness. They just don't realize that that's what they're doing.
No, I agree. Well, I guess, and again, it's probably because religion is such a trigger,
Yeah.
for so many people.
Mhm.
But we are a global world now, like literally, like global economy, a global, you can travel anywhere, you can go anywhere. And all of us from around the world, pick up traditions from the countries we visit or the places we go. Immigrants bring new traditions to our countries. And so to me, mindfulness practices are no different than anything else we might pick up and probably alter to match, to suit our needs. And then one of the other things and I read this a long time ago, but there is some evidence that uh, mindfulness precedes Buddhism.
Mhm.
So that's 2,500 years ago, but they have found some evidence that goes way back. Ancient Egyptians practiced certain, I don't know, activities that if you look at them now, they are the basis of some mindfulness activities that are practiced around the world. So, like anything else in culture, it's almost like somebody's looking to see who owns it, and
Mhm.
or who started it. That's the owner of it, and that's how it should be. And I just don't think that's true of anything anymore. I think that as we have evolved as civilizations and just spread everywhere for different reasons around the globe, that it's a mindfulness practice to be curious and open and non-judgmental and to just, look at it. The little things we touched on today, some of those might resonate with someone and they didn't realize that, oh, I love to practice elegant, food preparation or tea making or, could be anything. But it's more, to me, it's more a matter of like, instead of labeling it as something and trying to force it to be one thing, that it's more a matter of, I mean, for the purposes of teaching, I do think it's important so that if, for instance, if someone has a very specific religion and they don't want anything to conflict with it, then secular meditation or mindfulness would be the way to go. But for some people, they might be looking for that spiritual connection or maybe
Yeah.
looking for that religious connection to something. And then why not explore and let's call it borrow, but I don't think it's misappropriating. I think it's wanting to reach that state of mind where we can think of ourselves and others instead of living a more fear-based life
Mm-hmm.
and experiencing all the benefits to our minds, brains, bodies, communities, everything that mindfulness can bring to it. So to me, the difference would be, I guess, between borrowing practices or adapting practices to misappropriation is the amount of respect you give the practice.
Oh,
So like I'm
100%. Yeah.
very respectful of the original Buddhist practices. I mean, I keep toying with the idea, do I want to become a Buddhist? Like, because I think it's a beautiful, again, I think it's more a philosophy than a religion, but um, there are so many different practices. When I was doing this, like when I got to the chanting tradition, it's like, I remember how powerful that was in some class I took. And I don't know why it fell to the wayside, but I think there's pieces of all of these traditions that could enhance our lives and help us all to be kinder to each other. And, the loving kindness meditation is one of the most powerful meditations, I think, on the planet. So I guess I would encourage people to just, you know, be open and check out things that resonate, even if you don't think it matches your preconceived notion of, what you're supposed to do based on your culture or your religion or anything else, just to see if it's something that you might benefit from, but that also might benefit others around you.
Yeah. And I don't know any religion. I mean, I could be completely naive here, but I don't know any religion that tells you to not try to educate yourself. So if you can learn more about all of these other religions, that is really going to open up your perspective and open up your heart and lessen your bias. And if something actually ends up speaking to you through one of those teachings, then my goodness, wouldn't that be amazing? You're really broadening your perspective and all of the things that you could gain from it. That's one of the things I love about mindfulness. It's not fear based. There's nothing like that in it. It's solely from the love heart perspective, and I wish that we could all kind of see that and maybe practice it.
So whether it's mindfulness, meditation, or even religion or spiritual practices, I sorely miss before things got crazy for us in the last, like for me, especially in the last 10 years. I spent a lot of time reading, Karen Armstrong's books because
Mhm.
she writes books on every religion and, going to spiritual psychology classes and really just trying. It wasn't about, I was doing it for the purpose of changing my beliefs or practicing something new, even. It was just to learn to better understand the world. If you even think of literature, there's a lot of literature that I don't get the references to because it's specifically, maybe it's based in Islam or it's based
Mm.
on an ancient civilization that I'm just not familiar with. And so the combination of history and religious studies, I think, is fascinating in, like what you were saying, just educating myself. It's not about that I have to do what they're doing. It's about
Mhm.
understanding other people.
Yeah, and we're so rigidly connected to that thing that we feel gives us, purpose in life. And a lot of people identify that to religion. And so I think we're nobody's asking anyone to give up your religion at all. It's just more about really trying to kind of see how other people operate, why they operate they do, and that really helps you with that. I mean, for me, with all of the stuff that's going on in the world, it's very easy to make a snap judgment on, Israel, on Palestine, on Hamas, on all of these different things. It's really easy to make your snap judgment because you don't have all of the facts and you're only told what you're told,
Right.
and you're not going to do that research on your own. But if you kind of look a little deeper and see, gosh, how did this start? And a lot of it does stem from religion, and understanding the perspective of why somebody operates the way they do, gosh, it could change the world.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you're condoning it.
No,
It just
not at
means
all.
you're understanding it. Yeah. I mean, I always know I need to really do some research and reflection when I hear my own mind saying, like, why do they keep doing this? Or why,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like, why does this keep happening? Something like that, which is really a form of judgment. It's like, oh, okay, I don't understand the issue. I need to like delve a little deeper here. And again, I may not agree with whatever it is I'm reading or with what they're practicing or what they're doing, but it gives me some insight into maybe why something is happening.
Mhm.
And then I can either more clearly see why it's like, especially with what's happening in the Middle East right now, that it's, what is this now? Is it 1,000 years of this or more? Why they haven't been able to resolve it.
Mhm.
Because I don't like that feeling of just that why question. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now, does that mean it changes anything? No. But it does mean that then I am not judging an event without understanding more about why it's occurring. And that does make me feel not only more informed, but then maybe more open so that if I was ever talking to someone, I would be able to perhaps see more than just my own biased side. I
Right.
could see,
Right.
something of their side. So I do
Yeah.
think it's important. And I think with the way the direction we've been moving over the past, couple of 100 years at least, maybe that's what we all need is just to step back a little and say, okay, wait, instead of just deciding what's right, wrong, good, bad, who's right, who's wrong, mindfulness it helps you create that space
Mhm.
so that you don't make the snap judgments, so that you don't give into your cultural biases, because we've all got cultural
We all
biases.
have them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I agree 100%. And mindfulness, I mean, we say it every single episode, but it really does help you get there, where you
Yeah.
can kind of take that step back and look at the world a little differently and not
Yeah.
pass that judgment. And I mean, that's kind of what a lot of religions do try to teach is, don't judge other people and, come from a place of love. And, I think
Yeah.
mindfulness does help you do that because you don't have a lot of the history behind it of conflict and all of those other things.
Right. Right.
You know?
Well, I think we're going to definitely need a lot of mindfulness in the coming months.
1 month, right?
Oh
It's
gosh.
October 3rd.
It's 32 days or something. We're talking about our election here in the United States
Yeah, if you're not in
that
the
we're all
US,
dreading,
I'm sure you've heard of our election, but oh God.
that everyone's dreading, no matter what political party you're affiliated with. But I do think it is a very, I mean, not to reduce it to just this, but it is a very effective tool. So
Yeah.
I encourage you to practice mindfulness, of course, but then I also encourage you to do some exploration. I've talked about this, I know, once before, where from the perspective of sometimes we get bored with just
Mhm.
regular secular or mindfulness, but there's a lot of opportunity that goes way beyond just not being bored. So you may discover some interesting things about other cultures or about yourself.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and I wish you a lovely week, and we hope to see you back here again next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
This
week.
podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to other great shows. Visit our website, amindfulmoment.com, to access podcasts, scripts, and reading recommendations. A Mindful Moment is hosted by Teresa McKee and Melissa Sims. This podcast is produced by Work to Live Productions. Thank you for tuning in.